Hello everyone and welcome to CommerceLab's online Q&A on the topic of developing your own startup. My name is Rick Ph.D. and I'm going to be your moderator for today. As many of you know, this event today is an extension of an earlier face-to-face workshop that CommerceLab had delivered in various locations across Canada. And those workshops were directed at academics and students who were interested in learning more about how they might commercialize their research ideas. That half-day workshop was basically an introduction, I believe, to a lot of the issues that we feel are important, and we wanted to follow up with a chance for them to ask more detailed questions around areas that were of particular interest to them. And while many of you are who are watching this program are here because you have participated in those earlier workshops, CommerceLab was also keen on making sure this was available to a wider audience, and we hope that if anyone is out there, that you'll also take this opportunity to submit your questions, and I'll give you some information about how to do that shortly. And we hope this will be an informative and engaging program that will benefit you as well. As I'd mentioned, we have invited a panel of experts here to help us with our program. People who have kindly given up their time and are here willing to share their wide degree of expertise in this area. So let's get right down and let's start by introducing our panel. So how about if we start with you, Jake, and tell us where you are and what you do.
Jake Arsenault, technology entrepreneur. Between ventures, so looking to start the next venture. Past venture, I think, can relate to this session. I basically commercialized my Ph.D. thesis. Went from concept, so chalkboard concept, to a product. So basically, this is the first CAT scan you can use practically for infrastructure. It's a single-side CAT scan, and got a minimal viable product for civil infrastructure and oil and gas. So I've seen the early stage and the funding process and building a team. So I've been through this and can provide context or answers to my journey through commercialization.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Jake. So Jake is actually located in New Brunswick, and Josh, who I'll introduce next, is on a trip and talking to us from New York City. Hello, Josh.
Hello, everybody. Josh right here. I'm one of the founders of Decision.io. We're a Waterloo, Ontario-based startup company focused on creating online products for enterprise and not-for-profits to really capture their group decision-making processes and workflows. So it's very much a collaborative and really easy-to-use tool to sort of manage different items and move them through different stages of review, that kind of stuff. Feel free to check us out or contact me. It's no problem. Right now we're down in New York City as part of a top 3 accelerator program. So it's a program where you sort of enter for 3 months, live down here, work in their office on 5th Avenue, and they give you some investment and really give you hands-on mentorship and get you ready for the fundraising process. So we're going through some interesting times right now. Previously too, and something I can speak to, I was the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Accelerator Center in Waterloo, and I worked at the commercialization office at the University of Waterloo as well. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Josh. I'm real glad that you're here with us as well. Next, let's introduce Mary, who's working in Halifax, and there's 3 of us in Halifax. We're in the midst of a huge blizzard right now, so I'm hoping that's not going to interfere with our event. But hello, Mary, and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Kilfoyle, and I teach at the Starting Lean Initiative at Dalhousie University Faculty of Management in the Rose School of Business. This is a course that we launched in 2012 using the Lean Launchpad methodology, and it is using teams. Students work in teams. They begin by pitching an idea, and during the course of the term they use the Lean Canvas, Osterwalder's Lean Canvas model, and together with mentors from the startup community, and they move that idea along through the term and start to really learn how to do customer discovery, how to look for opportunities in the market, how to pivot, and how to sort of move that idea further along. I also teach launched a course this year called Innovation, and it is using design thinking process to help students who have an idea, again, get out of the building and go talk to end users, really understand the problem, understand the solution to that problem, and allow the end user to sort of co-create that solution with you. So I'm very much excited to be part of today's panel.
Great, thanks, thanks, Mary. And last but not least, also from Halifax, we have Robert Cowan, who's our lawyer fella from the firm of McInnes Cooper. Hello there, Robert.
I'm the snowed-in lawyer fella today. So, hi, my name's Robert Cowan. I'm a lawyer with the McInnes Cooper based in Halifax. I work with technology startup companies, so I help entrepreneurs who have an idea when they form a team, help them get set up, incorporated, structured. I do a lot of early stage angel funding, later stage venture capital funding, and all the way through to exit. So interesting times here in Atlantic Canada. We've really seen the emergence of a strong startup ecosystem. And before I joined McInnes Cooper, I worked for about a few years at Dalhousie University, where I was in the technology transfer office, and we were assessing invention disclosures, looking at patentability, commercial potential, and looking for licensing partners or opportunities to spin out a company.
Great. Thanks, Robert, and thanks to all of you who have agreed to be on our panel today. I really appreciate you being here. Now, I should say before we start that many of the questions that we're going to be looking at have been presented to us by the participants in these face-to-face workshops that we have had previous to this. But that doesn't mean that any one of you can't also continue adding to our questions, and we'll see what we can, how many we can handle in the hour that we have together. If you wish to submit some questions, you can do this by Twitter at Twitter at the CommerceLab. Twitter at the CommerceLab, so that's one approach. You can also email questions to hangout@commercelab.ca. Again, that's hangout@commercelab.ca. And on the Google Plus event page, I'm told there's a section there for comments as well. So feel free to add any additional questions or to piggyback on questions that we're looking at in case you want to probe a bit more deeply or to explore a nuance that we haven't. I should also say that, as it has been pointed out to me, probably any of these questions could be the basis of a day-long workshop, in and of themselves, and we can't pretend that we're going to be able to answer all of them to the extent that people want, but we're going to do our best. And at the very least, I'm hoping that we can, highlight some of the key issues, and also just to make people aware of the great resources in your community, people like the members of our panel right now, as well as the organizations that are in your area that can be of help to you if you decide to move forward on this. So, with that being said, let me start off with the first questions that I had. I see that the first questions maybe can apply to both of the themes, and I forgot to say that today's theme is on startups, and we have another similar workshop tomorrow at the same time that's dealing with the issue of licensing and working with a partner. But these first questions could apply to either theme, and I think I'll start with you, Robert. The question is, at what point should I be serious about protecting my IP? And there's maybe some sub-questions that go along with that maybe you could roll into this. It says, how important is a patent when I'm starting with an idea? When along the product development cycle is it best to register your patent idea? Even how finished does a product need to be before even filing such a patent? Any thoughts on that one?
Sure. Perhaps I could just take it up to a little higher level first. I mean, unlike other forms of IP, like a trademark, or in some cases, or like copyright, or in some cases trademark, if you're going to get a patent, you actually have to apply for one. So you have to do a full invention disclosure, file it with the patent office, and it goes through this process of examination and negotiation with the patent office, and eventually, often in a few years, like 3, 5, 7 years, it might issue. So the first step is really just keep it confidential, right? So you may not know whether or not it's patentable, but you may have this idea that you think has, or you're developing something that you think has potential. You want to, within certain limits, just kind of keep that without making it a public disclosure. So in a university context, that would be, not going and presenting at a symposium or publishing a paper that discloses your idea, because if you do that, you've you've basically taken away your ability to get a patent in most countries of the world. So if you have an invention and you're going to make a public disclosure of it through a paper or other means of publication, then you probably want to fairly early on, if you're in an academic setting, go and apply, get your patent filing in, and after that point, you can talk about your invention publicly and still be able to get a patent. But with a startup, often the big consideration is, do I need a patent, or is this something that I can build a product around or have a service around that isn't, without actually filing a patent application. And in some, industries, like if you're in a life sciences industry, then a patent is obviously more important. If you're in an ICT, like an internet company, perhaps less, unless you're going head-to-head with a Google or a Microsoft.
Just to jump in here a bit, Robert, one question, this person says, I've already submitted a paper. It's not accepted yet, but should I postpone the process? Because I'm not too sure how long a patent process will take.
So when you're submitting a paper, the thing is to get your patent or an application in and filed, and after that point, you're okay to talk about that particular application. You don't have to wait until the patent actually issues before you make your public disclosure. So often patent applications can be done in relatively short time frame, so it doesn't lead to an inordinate delay. So for people who are going to a symposium or a conference to make a presentation, if you're at a university, talk to your tech transfer office about what the steps are and how you can make something happen.
Thanks. I have to admit, I'm in the enviable position of not being a lawyer, so I'm going to give myself permission to ask the dumb question. So I've always been curious. Do you have to file a patent? Like, let's say we're in Canada. Do we have to file a patent in Canada, and does that apply around the world, or do I have to file patents everywhere? Yeah,
that's a great question, because that's a common misconception. People talk about a worldwide patent, but there really is no such thing. Patents are issued on a country-by-country basis. So if you've got a patent in Canada, then you have your exclusive right to make, use, and sell that invention in Canada, but people in England, France, anywhere else in the world would be free to use it without restriction. And that's one of the drawbacks, I guess, when you look at a patent, because the deal that you get, or it's a bargain you make with the government, you get, the exclusive right to make, use, and sell your invention in that jurisdiction. But the flip side of that is you have to make a full and public disclosure of your invention. So the patent application actually has to describe what your invention is and how you do your invention, if you will, a step-by-step recipe. So it's out there, and that can be, for some companies and startups, that is a trade-off that isn't really acceptable. The other barrier when it comes to patents is because you have to apply all around the world, it can, patent costs can run you to several $100,000 per patent.
Anyone else want to chime in with something?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. One would be a way to defer things a bit is to file a provisional patent.
Can you explain that one a bit, Jake?
Well, it's not the full patent. You file, let's say you file in the U.S. And again, I'd speak to your lawyer to get the details. But you can file, it's not the full patent, it's a little cheaper. And then you have about a year, I think it's exactly a year till you have to file the full patent. But what you get out of it is that you get the filing date. So it's not like you're deferring the filing of the full patent.
That's right, Jake.
Speak to a lawyer for I guess that's more your space, I guess, Rob.
Yeah, sorry to jump in there. That's true. There is by filing, the key thing is a filing date, and that gets you, after that, you're okay. That's your kind of priority date, and there is this strategy of U.S. patent before you file a full patent that helps you manage the costs a little bit. So it's less expensive to do a provisional than to do a full patent. So you do smaller payment on filing. The larger, patents can run you, $15,000, $20,000. That would be, you'd have in about a year. And then when you move into filing on a country by country basis, that happens about 36 months after you file. So you can see the costs start to escalate. It's not that you have to have all of that funding in place immediately.
Right.
Yeah, so like a big part of that would be is that you're deferring your cash flow.
Josh, how about you? Any thoughts that you might have?
As sort of the founder of a startup doing software, it's an interesting world. It's very much the Wild West. I just add in that if you are working on software, you can get patents on certain processes or certain code or algorithms, that kind of stuff. It's just something that you want to define very well. One analogy that I heard from a patent lawyer in California was, okay, so yeah, you could patent something but never get this patent on, say, a phone. You could go all the way down to every spec, every detail, every color, piece, part, whatever, and it would never have any value because anybody could sort of usurp that process. And just when you're defining with your lawyers how to sort of define the boundaries of these patents, it's an interesting thing to consider, like, okay, how broad can I go without sort of infringing on other patents out there? I don't know. That's just sort of my very layman perspective when you're describing and thinking about patents, that you got to aim for that middle, not the crazy, really detailed stuff, and not the phone period. Like there's a lot of different components to think about there.
Yeah, no.
I just thought
no, those are great points, Josh. Thanks for jumping in with that. And Robert, another question that came up, and not to disparage your profession or to edge you out in any way, but someone asked, do I really? I mean, how important is it to involve a lawyer? Do I need a lawyer to draft things like a non-disclosure agreement? Does it make it any less legal if I'm making this up, download something and work with, something like that? Or what are the risks and advantages of either option?
Sure. I mean, that's always a consideration because there's obviously a cost to consulting professionals of any variety, just like tax advice from your accountant or legal advice from your lawyer. I mean, the good news is that do-it-yourself contracts, it's not any less enforceable just because you didn't involve a lawyer. I think the danger is that finding something on the internet is perhaps not applicable to your particular situation. Often the discussions or negotiations, if you pick a non-disclosure agreement, are you the only one that's disclosing the confidential information, or is it a mutual disclosure description of the purpose for which you're talking? And one of the challenge and the other factor, so finding something on the internet may not be applicable to your own situation, but the other thing is that the laws, for example, if you find something on the internet, a lot of the stuff that you find, or that I've seen that clients have given me that they found on the internet, is based on U.S. law, and U.S. law is different in a few key ways from Canadian law. So it is something you need to be careful about. You can't just sort of grab a U.S. precedent, a U.S. document and say, great, that'll work for me here in Canada, or if I'm doing a contract with somebody in Germany, it's just not going to be the same. And you do run into risks that way.
Yeah, no, those are great points, Rob. How about if we inch forward a little closer to the startup theme here? I know that in our original workshop we highlighted the need for anyone who has a research idea to actually do their work and you need to explore more explicitly whether my idea is just a good idea, or is it, is there actually some potential for it to be commercialized? And I guess a question along that route, I'll direct this one to you, Mary. How do you find your target market? And I suppose implied in that is, how do I know whether I even have something to market in the first place? And how do you get people even to buy what I want to provide? What are your thoughts about that?
Thanks, Rick. This is such an important question, especially in the university context where you're looking at research and you're looking at the commercialization potential. One of the things that we came across in doing a SSHRC research piece was something called the I-Corps program in the U.S., which is funded through the National Science Foundation, where researchers and principal investigators within the university setting can receive a modest amount of money to look at the commercialization potential. And in order to be eligible for that, they had to have on their team an entrepreneur and somebody from the business startup community, and use the Lean Launchpad methodology, which is where we've really first discovered that. And since then, we've launched a course at Dalhousie, and other universities are using it as well. And using that Lean Launchpad approach, using the business model canvas. And the idea behind this is it's a very good methodology and approach, especially in the early stage where you are doing exactly that. You are trying to figure out whether your idea has any commercialization potential or has any legs. And the first stage of that is really understanding two things. What's your value proposition? In other words, what value or would you be bringing to customers? Would customers be willing to pay for it? And really drilling down on that at the granular level. What's the problem that you're solving? What's the need that you're addressing? And secondly, who are your customers? So going through this approach, and again using the canvas is merely a tool to help you help organize your thoughts on this, but it really helps you to understand what is the market and what is the need for your product, and who are your customers. And as you continue to do customer discovery, and that is when you speak to Steve Blank and Alexander Osterwilder, that is the term that they use as being the most critical piece for startups. They describe startups as essentially being in search mode and searching for your business model. A big piece of that is really understanding what is the value proposition and who are your customers. And as you start to learn more about your customers, who are they, where would they use it, what you're doing is interacting with those customers, using this methodology, getting out of the building and talking with them, and doing a lot of listening to really understand how would they use your product or your service, what are they using now, what problem could you address, and telling them a bit about your idea, but more so doing the active listening. And in our case, when we're doing this with students, researchers at the upper undergraduate level and graduate level, doctorate and postdoc, master's level, all of the students are together in the course. They work with mentors, and each week they're required to do 15 to 20 customer discovery interviews. And so they have to get out of the building and synthesize what they've learned. And so this is really the lean part of it before you sort of run off with your idea, spend a lot of money building a prototype or actually launching. You are in the process of figuring out what's your value proposition and who are your customers. You're also figuring out what your minimum viable product is. And so what is the minimum feature set that you could take to market, and that helps you actually understand your go-to-market strategy. Right. So in the process of using that methodology, if you use it, you may not be able to get 10 to 15 or 20 customer discovery interviews in a week. Nonetheless, you sort of keep learning more about that customer segment. So the best laid business plan, and this is not to put business plans down because, again, we need planning, and that's a very good document for planning. But the very best research online will only tell you part of the story. It's not until you really get out and talk to customers that you sort of really understand that market.
So just to reiterate a few points that I'm hearing you say, one is the tools such as the startup and the Canvas methodology. Just that process of exploration will help you to identify your market, and also, what will entice them to buy your product. I got that, and I was also intrigued though to hear that there's actually money available to help people do that in some instances. Did I hear that right?
Yes. So depending on your school or your program, there's money available. There's competitions, student competitions. There's also once you sort of get your idea up and running a little bit, you can then apply for funding through, in Atlantic Canada, it would be a COA. The provincial agencies also have funding. Oftentimes, the university, even while you're still sort of doing that initial sort of work around the idea, very modest amount of money to help you maybe do some of that customer discovery. And so I think a lot of universities have that in place. And again, it depends on what stage you are with your idea. So we just use the Canvas as a tool, but the idea is really about getting out and talking to potential customers.
Great. And I know that in our earlier face-to-face workshop, we provided quite a bit of, I'm hoping, information about resources that you could find in your community and online around those methods. But in addition to using the Canvas method, and I'm curious, what are other supports or resources that people can draw on to help them to develop their product? I know there's things around, the incubators and accelerators, etc. Could you speak a bit more about, how people get support to do all that?
Yes. So there's the Next 36, which is Canada's largest student accelerator. That is every year they take in students from across Canada who are working on ideas or who have done entrepreneurial courses or have an idea they'd like to work on. Here in Atlantic Canada, we have a virtual accelerator, Launch 36, which is powered by ICT Propel. A lot of universities now have a sort of, we're now starting to think more about sandboxes and collaborative workspaces, especially in the early days when you're trying to get information from a lot of different sources, and including mentors who can come in from the university and sort of from the startup community, interface with you, and we're starting to see more accelerators. So in Atlantic Canada, we have Volta. We now have accelerator in New Brunswick, Accelerate. So, and I think this is, and across Canada, various, in most cities that have universities also have the sort of accelerators that students can move into.
And Josh, what do you know of that exists in the Ontario region?
The provincial government, the Ministry of Research and Innovation, has sort of set up these different regions. They're called regional innovation centers. So in Waterloo, where we're from, and one of the bigger ones is called Communitech. In Toronto, there's Mars. So there's several of these regional innovation centers. They're funded by the provincial government, and they're there to basically help startups in that area. They provide a variety of different services. Most of them focus on the startup services. Some get into partnershiping with small to medium-sized businesses. The model is really sort of partnering with the universities and different companies in the area. They'll run all kinds of events and workshops and different topical things. So it's definitely worth looking into if you are in Ontario, because there's some good programming out there to support and get you started. Definitely.
Great, thanks for that. I know we're just over halfway, and I just wanted to remind people, if anyone's interested in submitting some more questions, just in case you didn't hear it the first time, you can use Twitter at Twitter at the CommerceLab. That's one route. And also you can send an email to hangout@commercelab.ca. Just a reminder for anyone who wants to send in some questions. Maybe to move forward, I'll get Robert back on to ask some questions around just the whole startup thing. Maybe big picture, what are some of the key legal issues that people should consider when they're actually starting a company?
Sure. Well, one thing when a group of individuals come together is, does it make sense for us to incorporate our business now? And there are a couple of considerations there. One is, you're limiting your own personal liability by incorporating a company, because it's a company is considered a separate legal person. So if there are debts and obligations of the company, the individual owners of it are not responsible for those. I mean, the other thing that you get, that you want to consider is, because with the company you've got to issue shares, so you're going to need to, who's in your group? Are they all going to be engaged in the business going forward? Because you don't want to have a situation where you get together with a bunch of friends and you divvy the company up, so 5 people have equal ownership interests, and then, really terrible things can happen to you if 2 or 3 of those people leave, because suddenly you found, you've got a big chunk of your ownership is now with people who aren't involved in the business, and that can create a real problem for investors coming in down the road. They, people who are putting their money in your venture don't like to see, large chunks of ownership owned by people who, were founders initially, who got involved and then are no longer involved in the business. Yeah, so those are a couple of considerations.
Yeah, I can see those would be of importance to potential investors for sure. Jake, I noticed that when Mary was presenting, you were nodding your head a bit. Forgot to ask if you wanted to pitch in with a comment or two there.
Oh, well, yeah, I just thought that the main points Mary made, in my view, are pretty much essential to doing a venture. And I think the fundamental thing she hit, I agreed with 100%. And that I'd add that a lot of the risk of a venture, I think that process is a big part of the risk manager of the whole process. Like the whole venture is probably one of the key things to reduce the risks. And I guess I might think of it more in terms of a few sound bites. But I'd say that product development or even commercialization is a sales process all the way through, and then that's a key thing. And I'd say engagement is sales is driving the whole thing, and that to do that, and just to piggyback on what Mary was saying, you want to wear out your shoes, you want to wear out that telephone, because you want to be engaging people. And there's programs and there's all this stuff, but the main thing is that you're on the phone, you travel, you're in front of the customer, and that you're there engaging. And a nice little analogy I like is you want to be a rabbit, not a hippo. So in that meeting, you want to have great big ears, and you want to have a little mouth, and you're trying to find, and the way I look at it is you want to find a killer pain point. So you want to find something that is, you're talking, you're listening, that they've got such a pain or burden that they don't even realize it's there anymore because it's all callous. But you listen and you find this pain point, and that if you have the promise of taking away that pain, you're the top handful of things on their list to do. You got their attention, and a test would be if you can get them to write a check, provide resources, provide letters. So I think it's that engaging, listening, finding that pain, and then seeing it, proving it by getting people to write you checks for different things. And that process never ends. You're doing that forever.
Josh? I couldn't agree more with you, Jake. That's a really good point, and Mary too. Like all of those things for sure. Even sort of putting the starting point at recognizing the need that you're filling before you start building the product. I think that was mentioned. And the only other thing I'd add to that is when you're choosing your target market, make sure it makes sense. Like, is there a big enough market? I know that was sort of implicit in a lot of the comments made, but I think making sure that you're hitting a market that has enough of enough volume that you can actually create a sustainable business or get towards where you want to be in terms of your goals. I think that's an interesting piece as well. I think from the university standpoint too, though, a lot of this commercialization is stemming from research. And it may be curiosity-driven research, so it's good to be careful and really do get out there and talk to potential customers and validate those ideas. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jake, for sure.
Thanks, Josh. How about you, Robert? Any last words?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the one thing about the startup communities, no matter where they are, is they all tend to be fairly integrated, cohesive, and always willing to help. I mean, entrepreneurs, other founders, investors are always people who run accelerators are even if they don't have a formal relationship with you, they're always willing to help. So when you're, if you're starting from a university and a research project, just go out and ask people, ask for introductions to other people, and you'll find that, no matter where you are in the country, you're going to have people are going to willing to help you. And doing what I do, I've had the opportunity to travel to a number of interesting places, and sometimes these communities, like I was in Arkansas this past summer, and I was amazed at the startup community there that was there too. You had the university, you had government, you had entrepreneurs, investors, all coming together and willing to help. So a lot of these points sound very daunting, but there's a great resources there available to help out if you're just ready to ask.
Now, I'm curious, Robert, and I'd also be interested from the rest of you. What can anyone do to be making themselves more attractive to potential investors? I mean, do you need a patent, for example, or what are the things that you would do that would position yourself as I said, in an attractive fashion?
Sure. Well, there was a phrase I heard a couple of years ago that horrified members, colleagues of mine who were patent lawyers, and that was that traction is the new IP. So for a while, it was a lot of focus on, I have to, what's my intellectual property that I can defend, that I can protect, and that's mine. And there was this theory that if I had a patent, that I would be more attractive to investors. And I think now, generally speaking, it's different. Different sectors are different. I talked about life sciences, but in a gross generalization, that investors really want to see that you actually have traction. And by traction, that's customers, people who are willing to pay you to use your product. So traction is a great thing. They're looking for that, but once you have that, then they may say to you, okay, well, what is it that you can protect in what you have so somebody else can't just go out and do what you do? And that's kind of where the patent comes in. But so I would say kind of the two go hand in hand.
Right. How about others? What do you think about strategies for making yourself attractive?
A couple of thoughts. I think a patent, nice to have, and it really depends on what you're trying to do. A key point, I think, is traction. I agree with that you can, even if there's not a product yet, that there's credible companies or customers or organizations that will recommend or say that this is a good idea, do demos, trials, provide resources. So I think it's to show that there's people that want this, even if there isn't anything yet, that they'll say, if this existed, we'd buy it. Another key point, too, so you've got IP, you show traction, and that you have a plan or a pitch that is defendable. So that if you're engaged and you're being stress tested, and you keep working on it, that you can handle almost any question to explain your business very quickly and in a positive way.
Any tips, Jake, on what makes a good pitch?
I think you've got to iterate. So I think you're out first, maybe talk to people that aren't your target investors, pitch it, lick your wounds, refine it, and just keep going and going, and talk to mentors, talk about your plan until you get it till you get it rock solid. That's my thought anyway.
Any other thoughts from folks?
Yeah, just to add quickly to what makes you attractive for investors, or what makes your startup good. Basically, I think two of the key points, and I may have missed a little piece at the beginning of Robert's discussion, but You've got to play in a big market. Often venture capitalists, they won't even look at you if it's not a multi-billion-dollar market. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things, and you have to be able to explain yourself on that. The other piece that I'd add is the team, and not just the founding team and the current team, but your ability to hire. And in this case, down here in the States, it's basically all you do is fundraise and hire engineers. If you ask anybody down here, so it's a necessary skill to be able to find and retain really top talent. And keep them motivated. I think that company culture piece is something that is more and more attractive to investors to make sure that you're going to last, right? It's not going to be some kind of explosion.
I can imagine that's a really daunting aspect of this. If you're an academic, your strength is not in structuring an organization, hiring people, all the HR stuff. Any thoughts around how do you go about doing that basic operational kind of activity to get things off the ground?
Well, I think it's as with any of the growth of your team, you have to look at what you're good at and what you're not. So you hire for the deficiencies that you have as a person. Like, I can't do any technical development, so therefore I need to hire developers. If I can't administer or manage teams or hire on people or do that kind of businessy side, operational side stuff, then I need to find a co-founder that sort of has some knowledge in that area or is at least willing to learn. I think that's really, really key to have a complementary skill set within your team and make sure that it all works and meshes together. I think that's really key.
All right.
Good question.
Now, Robert, I imagine this is your area, but what are some thoughts around the whole way that you might structure a company and set things up? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mentioned earlier when it comes to setting up a company and handing out shares, that you do want to be fairly, and again, this is a generalization, fairly stingy and not, have everybody who, all your friends and family in as part of the initial team, and give them, some ownership in your company. I mean, Josh mentioned that, the team is one of the key things that investors we'll look at, and so I think that's something to bear in mind. The other thing, just to go touch on the pitch again, is one of the things that one of the pitfalls that often people fall into when they're pitching is they tend to talk too much about the science or the features and the benefits of their product, where when you're talking to an investor, they want to know, as Josh said, like, how big is the market, right? They'll accept that you know what you're doing and that your product that you're telling them about actually will do what you say it'll do, but they're going to want to know, how big is the opportunity? Have you, how many customers have you talked to? So right. Those are things. And so when you're putting your team together, you want to have you want to have people who can do the development side of the project, but you need to have like somebody who's really strong at fundraising, because as Josh said, you're fundraising and you're hiring engineers, and those are very different skill set, and it's the rare person that can be the top flight developer or scientist, but is also very strong pitching.
I'm curious, where do people get money to, I guess one, develop the product, but I guess where my head's at right now with the operational side of things, now I know you can get investors, etc., but are there other sources of funding that people can maybe tap into? Are there any governmental sources, for instance?
Sure, and most, like here in Atlantic Canada anyway, we have the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, which has programs that will help you hire talent. Most of them are matching, require some sort of matching fund, so you have to come up with a little bit of money yourself, and then they'll put in the rest. And then there are other great programs like the Federal Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program, where they'll actually give you cold hard cash back as a certain percentage of your expenditures for salary and wages and others
the OCE. There's things in the university context like SHRC and NSERC, which has that's a federal level program. IRAP is another sort of funding agency that is pretty federal. I don't even know what that one stands for. Don't tell anybody. There's so many different funding agencies. I think the key is just diving in and just looking at each. And before you do any work on these sometimes very arduous processes to apply for grants, and I guess if there's a bunch of professors in the room, then they know all about applying for grant funding. But just make sure you're eligible and make sure that you sort of understand the details before you go for this often 2 or 3 month process to get cash. That's how we funded our entire business, that and revenue thus far. So it's definitely a viable option. We've been operating for about 2 years.
Yeah, I can imagine this. The fundraising alone must take an awful lot of time and energy on the part of the the company owners, etc. Right? It must take a lot of time.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest amount of time is actually creating the story around the fundraising. I'd consider the fundraising process and the grant application process a little different, just because it's much more subjective when it comes to pitching VCs and angels and that kind of stuff. And again, this is only me talking from analogy. We're just starting this process and just learning more and more about it. But I think the time-consuming piece is actually making sure that you're telling the right story in the right way and gaining interest, having traction, I guess.
And how about you, Jake? Any thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, I got a few points. I think you mentioned a point about a story. I think you do have to put a lot of thought into your story. It's a narrative, and that you have to think about the sequence. So you always have to, you start small and you keep building momentum, and you have to plan that out. And that if you're looking at, and you really have to think about what funding mechanism you're using and what programs, and then what sequence you can put those in. So I would definitely, get to know the reps of the different programs, build a relationship. That's the only way you can really understand the programs is that you have somebody in that department really guiding you through it, and you have to plan your sequence and maybe make some decisions which road you're going to go down. Right. Another point too, just of interest, would be if somebody's trying to commercialize what I call a deep tech. So let's say there's some new hardware, there's some new chemistry, something that there's a lot of work to get it to a form where it's commercially usable, and it might be something very novel where it could be a strong business. That you could do a phase of the funding, the work is done purely in the university setting first for let's say a proof of concept project, and then when that proof of concept project, let's say using NSERC, is finished, then it moves into a startup phase. And that a lot of the groundwork for building the commercial team can be going on in parallel when the university is doing a proof of concept work. So I don't think that it has to be privately funded or, let's say, all university-led. It really depends on what you're doing, and that there's options, and you have to really look under every rock for all the resources and put them in a sequence that work for what you're trying to do.
That's great. Thanks. Those are great points. I see that we have just a few minutes left here, so I'm thinking maybe one good question would be to ask, at what point might individuals start considering their exit strategy, and what are some issues that might influence if they decide to go down that path? Any thoughts, anyone? How about you, Jake? Any thoughts on that one?
I think you have to think about that from the beginning.
Yeah.
At least looking at the options. And another key point too is that if you're getting investors that they're taking the risk, and that they're looking for a certain deal, and that deserves respect, and that once you take on investors, it's no longer just your venture, and that the end point has to make sense to all parties, or at least negotiated what is fair more or less for everybody. So I think when you're taking investment, you really have to have at least a philosophy on that.
That's great.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, I think there's lots of kinds of businesses that get created. Some are venture capital backed. Some might be more lifestyle or boutique. So it depends on what the goals are of the person starting the business. But you have to consider what kind of business is this, what type of funding is it taking, what type of investment, and then the terms of that are set, based on that.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think it's a really key point to drive home that whoever's involved in the founding team or from the investor standpoint, whoever has ownership in your business, you've got to make sure you're aligned, because that's when your relationship would deteriorate. If there's an offer for $80 million, would you take it to sell your company, or are you in it to wait till you're worth 19 billion in your WhatsApp or whatever? Like, I think there's key to have some coordination and alignment when you're thinking about that type of stuff. Whenever somebody asks me that question, I'm like, well, we'll see what happens. I don't know necessarily if we're building for an exit. I don't know. That's just outside of my realm of understanding. We want to build a sustainable business. We want to build something that is the quality that it could eventually go IPO. But if somebody came with a huge check, you never know. I don't know. It's different in a lot of different viewpoints, I think, on that side.
And I see you nodding your head there, Mary. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is something that teams have to think. I agree with both Jake and Josh that this is something that you have to think about early. Oftentimes we see teams that, you start out and you sort of think, we're the founders, we own this company, but it goes back to the previous question, really, in terms of funding and when do you start to think about moving outside of, say, university funding into more angel funding and then equity and all these questions. You really have to stop and think, and there's a lot of iteration that happens. So you really, teams, you see them say, okay, we have to be prepared to give up, weigh out, what do we give up in order to get this? And so it's something that if you start looking at the end game and working backwards, you really do have to start thinking about it early. And what does everybody want? Does everybody want to build a company that's going to grow and last and stay in the community, or are people looking for an exit strategy? So you really do have to have agreement on that.
Yeah, and I hear what all of you are saying. It's better to think about that sooner than later, and not in the heat of the moment afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Robert, any thoughts that you might have on this one?
Yeah, I keep coming back to the alignment question. Is that startups are a lot of fun initially when you're getting going, but it can be a long, hard road. So you need to make sure that your interests are aligned with your co-founders, and that the people on your team are prepared to like Josh, get on a plane and go to New York for 3 months, and that's not for everybody. And then when you have investors, it's very important that what your goals are aligned with theirs, because their goal is to to have an exit, to have the company sold or go public within a certain period of time, between 5 and 10 years, and they're not interested in investing in a business that's just going to provide employment for its founders. It's always, sometimes these discussions are hard to have, but they're important to have at early and throughout as there are changes in your venture.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I've got one last question, and then we'll wrap up, I think. I get all of this there's so many nuances, and it all depends on circumstances. I can appreciate for any academic or grad student, this would be a very daunting and complex and confusing world to enter. What would you folks recommend is where they should go, where they can go to get help, some mentorship or some kind of support in wending their way through the complexity that this involves? Any thoughts? Maybe we'll start with you, Jake.
I'd err on the side of getting out more and talking to people. Go out, listen to, you want to get every viewpoint, so you want to see things from every side, talk to everybody. The advice you get is going to be like this, so it's just going to be conflicting, not everything's going to line up. Understand your context, and then make a decision. It's your decision, or whoever's pushing it, it's their decision. It's not going to be clear, but you should go out and talk to as many folks as that are willing, and that if you're polite and friendly, you'll be surprised with who will give you advice.
All right, how about you, Josh? What would you recommend? Any professional help you would suggest people go search out?
I'm finding a good lawyer. So Robert, there's your plug. the idea of having a good support network of friends and family that sort of understand what you're doing and understand that what you're going through. Finding the right mentors is really key, I think, and a lot of at least most major cities or areas across Canada will have these organizations set up to support innovation and entrepreneurship. The university that you're involved with, they'll be able to point you in the direction of resources. And I think just one thing to consider while you're doing it, like make sure it's something you love and that you really want to do, because sometimes you have just really terrible days, and some days you are just so tired, and some days you just feel like you're on top of the world. But it's this roller coaster that if you're not doing something to smooth it out that you're passionate about, it's a really, really hard road to carry through. So just think about it and find something you just really love.
Good, thanks for that. Mary, any words of advice you would give?
Yeah, I really liked Jake's analogy of be a rabbit rather than a hippo. So I'm going to use that, Jake.
Yeah. And
I stole it, so you feel free.
Okay.
Not mine.
I think you do have to work on your building a network. If you're within a university, look for the entrepreneurship center, people working in that area. Talk to your, build out understand sort of what's in your region in terms of accelerators and sandboxes, and start to get to know people in the startup community. And I think that you have to be prepared to have an open mind and pivot away from your original idea. So oftentimes people can't do that, and that I think is really, really important. And there's a lot of sense making in terms of what Jake said. You know, people are going to give you advice. They're going in different directions. You really have to sort of, I think, find like-minded individuals who are going through the same process and talk to them and find out what they've done, the resources that they've accessed. And I think very quickly you'll start to get to know the lay of the land in your region.
Well, thanks for that. Sorry, I had myself muted. So last word to you, Robert. What do you think?
Sure. Look, I listen. Go out, listen. I love that analogy as well. Be the rabbit. Talk. If you're in a university, there are lots of resources available within the university. You know, if you're looking on patent protection side, entrepreneurship side. It's important to go outside the university as well. You know, as I think we pointed out, most major centers have accelerators, incubators, and even if they don't, they are somewhere, and go. And most people are going to be willing to talk to you. And then the final thing is you just have to sort of be true to yourself. You know, do what feels right, and don't let yourself kind of get pushed in a way you're not comfortable going, because you will get that conflicting advice, and you have to wade through all of that, and there's no one path, and it's certainly not a linear journey, so you got to be comfortable with doing what you're doing and the role that you're playing.
Okay, thanks for that. And it sounds like we have our soundbite too with "Be the Rabbit," so that would be kind of our ongoing theme for this one here.
Nice.
So. With that, let's call it a day, and I want to thank our panel members, Jake Arsenault, Josh Wright, Robert Cowan, and Mary Kilfoyle. So thanks a lot, all of you, for helping us out with this program. And I guess we'll continue with anyone who wants to participate in tomorrow's session, which has to do with the licensing route as opposed to the startup route. All right, thanks very much, everyone.